Hey, how you doing? On this edition of the Waddles Writing Institute, we're going to be talking about something called zooming. When we zoom, what we're doing is we're actually zooming into a scene to expand it. We can all tell a story, but what we want to do is we want to tell our story in such a way that we've got dialogue, we've got details, we've got description, things that make the reading interesting, things that make the reader want to continue to read our story, right? That's the goal always, to entertain the reader in some kind of way. So, take a look at this quick presentation and everything will be crystal clear. All right? Check it out. Okay, zoom, zoom, zoom. What we're going to look at here in this presentation is ways that you can zoom in on a particular scene and make your writing better by adding details, description, and dialogue. Like I said, it's going to do two things. It's going to make your writing better, and there's also a secret bonus, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's first take a look at a scene from the story that I shared with you in class, the one about my great grandparents. So let's take a look at this first scene. One afternoon, James showed up as usual to talk with Mary, and she gave him some bad news. She told him that she and her family were going to leave to America. They were both sad, and they started to cry. They told each other that they loved each other, and then they said goodbye. Okay, so that's basically what happened, but it's pretty boring. Let's see if we can start making that a little bit better. First thing we're going to do, let's change the word bad to heartbreaking. We've already established earlier in the essay that this was a love story about how my great grandparents met and fell in love. Now, if we say bad news can be anything, but when we use that word heartbreaking, right away it's getting to the heart of the story. We know exactly what's going on here. Something is going to happen between James and Mary. Let's move on. We need dialogue. This is a pretty important moment, and so we need to let the characters speak. One afternoon, James showed up as usual to talk with Mary, and she gave him some heartbreaking news. James, she said, I have to tell you something awful. Last night my father told me that he can't find any work here in Ireland. Next week we're going to get on a boat for America. Mary, I promise that I will love you always. I don't know what the future might hold, but I know I will always hold you in my heart. They said goodbye. You can see already it's much better. But if we take a look, we can make it even more interesting. One rainy afternoon, James showed up as usual to talk with Mary, and she gave him some heartbreaking news. James, she said, I have to tell you something awful. Last night, my father told me that he can't find any work here in Ireland. Next week, we're going to get on a boat for America. At first, James didn't know what to say. The drizzling rain gathered on his hat and slowly dripped off the brim before splashing on the ground between them. Finally, he took Mary's hands in his and made her a promise. Mary, I promise that I will love you always. I don't know what the future might hold, but I know I will always hold you in my heart. And then he leaned over and gently kissed her on the cheek. It was their first ever kiss, and they both feared it would be their last. Now, I think we can agree that this is much better than what we started with, but let's take a look at why it's better. First of all, look at that word rainy. Now, this is a story that took place more than 130 years ago. Obviously, I don't know what the weather was like, but by choosing rainy, by describing the afternoon as rainy, I'm setting the mood. You know that something sad is going to happen. Next, look at this. At first, James didn't know what to say. James had just gotten some awful news. The love of his life is telling him that they might be apart forever. He's not going to respond right away. That little phrase, at first James didn't know what to say, lets the conversation breathe a little bit, makes it more authentic. Then we've got this. The drizzling rain gathered on his hat and slowly dripped off the brim before splashing on the ground between them. We're adding some imagery. That visual image of the rain falling on his hat and dripping into a puddle really lets the reader picture the scene, makes it much more interesting. Then we've got some action. Again, remember, action doesn't have to be someone scoring a touchdown or kicking a goal in soccer. What we've got here is just something simple. He took Mary's hands in his. It lets our reader see what's happening. And then here's some more action. And then he leaned over and gently kissed her on the cheek. Now look at this one. They both feared it would be their last kiss. It was their first ever kiss, and they both feared it would be their last. It's doing two things. We're establishing mood again. We understand how sad the two of them are, but it's also building suspense. This isn't the end of the story. We're wondering how it's going to turn out. So we can agree that this is much better. Let's take a look at where we started. Just with this simple paragraph, it told us what happened, but it wasn't interesting. Didn't make the reader want to keep reading. But there's a hidden bonus. Take a look at this. This little snippet, 55 words. When we improve the paragraph to this string of paragraphs, look at this, 150 words. So if you're trying to make your essay better and you want more length, and I know some of you need more length, this is the way to do it. Add details, add dialogue, focus on the mood, and I promise you, your essay is going to get better. So there you go. Doesn't that seem easy? Follow those simple steps. All you have to do is focus on the mood, add some dialogue, add some description, add some details, and your writing is going to be much better. Your readers are not going to be able to put your work down. That's what every author wants. See? So, until next time, this has been the Wattles Writing Institute. And remember, keep writing.